Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela's president for over a decade, has been a polarizing figure, seen by some as a revolutionary leader who stood up to foreign influence and championed the poor, but by others as a dictator responsible for his country's economic collapse, widespread shortages, and a crackdown on dissent that left thousands imprisoned or exiled. Now, in a stunning twist that few could have predicted, Maduro stands in a Manhattan federal courtroom, indicted by the U.S. on narco-terrorism charges, a moment that marks the first time a sitting president has faced such charges on American soil. For years, the U.S. refused to recognize Maduro's legitimacy, instead backing opposition leaders like Juan Guaidó and escalating tensions with sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and public calls for regime change. The 2020 indictment was largely symbolic, until January 2026, when the U.S. captured Maduro in a covert international operation that shocked the world and sent ripples through global politics. Allies of Venezuela have condemned the arrest, calling it an act of kidnapping and a violation of international law, while U.S. partners have offered cautious support for the prosecution, wary of the precedent it sets. The U.S. alleges Maduro turned Venezuela into a criminal enterprise, using state resources to traffic tons of cocaine into America and enrich his inner circle, fueling violence and corruption across the region. This story unpacks the secretive operation that brought him to U.S. soil, the sweeping charges he faces, and his defiant response in court, where he has refused to recognize the authority of the proceedings. We'll examine the political fallout in Venezuela, where protests have erupted and the government is in chaos, the Trump administration's controversial justification for military action, and the global debate it has sparked over sovereignty, justice, and the limits of U.S. power. What's next for Maduro, the high-stakes U.S. case, and a nation at a crossroads, as Venezuelans and the world await the outcome of this unprecedented trial? The world is watching as Venezuela's fate hangs in the balance, and history is being written in real time. The operation that brought Nicolas Maduro to the United States began in the earliest hours of January 3, 2026, while most of Caracas was still shrouded in darkness. It was a meticulously planned mission, months in the making, and its execution would send shockwaves far beyond Venezuela's borders. As the first hints of dawn crept over the city, residents were jolted awake by the thunder of helicopters slicing through the sky. Sirens blared and confusion erupted in the streets as U.S. Special Forces descended on the heart of the Venezuelan capital, launching a swift and highly coordinated raid on the presidential palace. The mission, authorized at the highest levels of the U.S. government, but without congressional approval, was designed to be surgical and overwhelming. Its objective: to capture President Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, with as little bloodshed as possible, and to avoid a drawn-out confrontation with Venezuelan forces. Elite American troops moved with precision, breaching the palace's defenses and apprehending the couple before most of the city's security apparatus could even react. The element of surprise was total, leaving Venezuelan guards stunned and outmaneuvered. Within just a few hours, Maduro and Flores, handcuffed and under heavy guard, were escorted onto a waiting U.S. military transport plane. Their destination, New York, where federal charges awaited. For many, it was a surreal sight, the culmination of years of tension and speculation. In Washington, the White House wasted no time in framing the operation as a landmark victory in the fight against international narco-terrorism. Officials hailed the mission as a demonstration of American resolve and capability, signaling a new era in U.S. foreign policy. The raid marked a dramatic departure from years of economic sanctions and diplomatic maneuvering. For the first time, the U.S. had moved from pressure and isolation to direct military intervention on Venezuelan soil, igniting fierce debate at home and abroad. U.S. officials pointed to the 2020 indictment against Maduro as legal justification for the strike, arguing that he was no longer recognized as a legitimate head of state, but as a fugitive from American justice. This legal rationale would become a flashpoint in the days to come. The operation drew immediate comparisons to the 1989 capture of Panama's Manuel Noriega, another bold U.S. intervention in Latin America. But the stakes in Venezuela were even higher, with the country already in deep crisis and its alliances stretching across the globe. The raid sent shockwaves through international diplomatic circles, setting a new and uncertain course for U.S.-Venezuelan relations. Allies and adversaries alike watched closely, weighing their next moves. Across the world, Critics and supporters debated the precedent set by using military force to enforce judicial indictments. Was this a necessary act of justice, or a dangerous overreach that could destabilize the region? As headlines blared and world leaders scrambled to respond, the global community was left to grapple with the far-reaching consequences of this bold and controversial move. In Caracas, the fallout was only beginning. The city and the world braced for what would come next. At the heart of Maduro's arrest is a sweeping U.S. indictment, unveiled by Attorney General Pam Bondi. It accuses Maduro and top officials, including his wife, son, and Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello, of running a criminal cartel within the Venezuelan state. The charges: narco-terrorism, cocaine importation, and weapons offenses, all tied to a decades-long conspiracy with the FARC. The indictment alleges state resources were used to protect and profit from drug shipments. Cilia Flores is accused of brokering deals and accepting bribes. Only Maduro and Flores are in U.S. custody, but the indictment marks others as fugitives. The case paints Maduro not as a politician, but as a kingpin at the center of a violent transnational enterprise. On January 5, 2026, Nicolas Maduro, the embattled former president of Venezuela, appeared in a Manhattan courtroom, a world away from the presidential palace he once called home. The imposing courthouse, surrounded by flashing cameras and a heavy police presence, was a stark contrast to the power and authority he once wielded in Caracas. Flanked by a team of high-profile lawyers, Maduro faced Judge Alvin Hellerstein, a respected figure in the U.S. legal system, and pleaded not guilty to all charges brought against him. The courtroom was tense, filled with anticipation as the world watched this unprecedented moment unfold. Through an interpreter, his voice steady but defiant, Maduro declared, "I am president of Venezuela. I am here kidnapped. I am innocent." His words echoed through the courtroom, a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the proceedings and a message to his supporters back home. He openly rejected the court's authority, framing his arrest and extradition as an act of American aggression against Venezuelan sovereignty. Maduro's defiance was unmistakable, as he sought to turn the trial into a global stage for his political struggle. By his side stood Cilia Flores, his wife and close political ally, who was arraigned alongside him. She too pleaded not guilty, her expression resolute as she faced the judge. Their defense strategy quickly became clear: challenged not only the charges, but also the legality of their capture and extradition. At the same time, their legal team began rallying international support, hoping to turn global opinion in their favor and pressure the U.S. government. Judge Hellerstein listened intently, then formally entered their pleas and set the next hearing for March 17, giving both sides time to prepare for what promises to be a complex and contentious trial. For now, Maduro and Flores remain in U.S. custody, held under tight security as their legal battle begins. Their fate, and perhaps the future of U.S.-Venezuela relations, hangs in the balance. The trial is set to test the limits of international law, diplomatic immunity, and the reach of American power. Legal experts and political analysts around the world are closely watching every development. Maduro's defiance has set the stage for a high-stakes legal and political battle, one that could have far-reaching consequences. As the world's attention remains fixed on New York, the outcome of this trial may reshape the global order. Maduro's removal triggered a rapid transition in Caracas. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in as interim president, vowing to defend Venezuela against what she called an unprecedented act of American aggression. She denounced the U.S. operation as kidnapping, rallying the ruling party's base but offering no military response. The transition was orderly, but uncertainty looms over Venezuela's future and Rodriguez's next steps. The world must now decide how to engage with a government in crisis, as Venezuelans brace for more upheaval. Maduro's capture split public opinion in both Venezuela and the U.S. Outside the Manhattan courthouse, supporters called him their president and decried the U.S. as imperialist kidnappers. Across the barricades, Venezuelan exiles cheered, seeing justice and hope for change. In Caracas, government loyalists expressed anger and fear, while others, long disillusioned, felt a cautious optimism. Many Venezuelans remain wary of U.S. intervention and skeptical that new leadership will bring real change. The country is gripped by uncertainty, with hopes for stability tempered by memories of hardship. The diaspora and those at home are united only by the sense that history is being made. The streets are tense, the future unclear. Venezuela stands at a crossroads. The Trump administration defended the raid as a law enforcement action, not an act of war. President Trump called Maduro a criminal kingpin, vowing he'd face American justice. Attorney General Bondi and Secretary of State Rubio argued the 2020 indictment justified the operation, since the U.S. never recognized Maduro as president. Trump also cited Venezuela's oil reserves as a motive, fueling criticism that economic interests played a role. The administration insisted military action was a last resort after failed diplomacy. Critics and supporters alike debated whether the operation was about justice, regime change, or resources. The rationale for the strike is complex, combining law, politics, and economics. The world is left to interpret America's true motives. The precedent set is as controversial as the action itself. The debate rages on. The operation has sparked fierce debate over legality and motives. Critics argue the U.S. set a dangerous precedent by using military force without congressional approval, violating international law. The move is contrasted with Trump's recent pardons of other convicted drug traffickers, raising questions about consistency. Some see the war on drugs as a pretext for regime change and control of oil. Allies worry the action could destabilize the region and erode norms of sovereignty. The controversy is about more than Maduro. It's about the rules that govern global power. With Maduro's arraignment complete, the legal battle begins. His lawyers will challenge the court's jurisdiction, arguing his capture was illegal. The prosecution will defend the operation and build its case. The trial could take years, with global implications for justice and diplomacy. Meanwhile, interim President Rodriguez faces the challenge of governing a nation in crisis. The opposition has a rare chance to regroup, but the path forward is unclear. Venezuela's fate now hinges on courtroom drama and political maneuvering. The world watches to see if this leads to justice or deeper conflict. January 2026 marks a turning point for Venezuela and international law. The next chapter is unwritten.